What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. We need to have the willingness to take responsibility for our behavior, and the willingness to take that information and to turn it into an action, which is what we do in step 9. And so we've been exploring step 9 and all of the things that step 9 has to teach us about making direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So what I want to do today is I want to take time to go through the 12 hidden rewards that exist when we work steps 8 and 9. And I've taken these from, I think it was the third book I wrote for Hazelton, The 12 Hidden Rewards of Making Amends. So the first thing, and these are things that are the consequences of all of the work that we've done so far. Another way to think about it are the results. We've been doing a lot of work on ourselves, and one of the things that we need to do in order to achieve emotional sobriety is to stay in close contact with our experience. So that's number one, staying in close contact with our experience. We learn that when we're working these steps, the more I stay in contact with my experience, the more I learn about myself. The more I learn about my relationships, the more awareness I have of my patterns and habits. And the more then I can try things on and experiment with new ways and see what that feels like. One of the large or big ideas, if you will, in the program is this idea, try it on and see how it fits, see how you like it, see what it does for you. So we start experimenting with different things. We try the opposite. And staying in touch with ourselves and staying in close contact with ourselves is different. Most of us avoided ourselves before coming into the program. The second thing that we're seeing the value of is being authentic. Instead of living according to these ideas of who we should be and how we should be, we see the incredible value and freedom in being who we are. So we're now forging a life that's based on authenticity, not trying to be what we think we should be, but actually being who we are. The third thing that we're learning here is how to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, is to have real compassion and empathy for other people and in terms of their struggles and what's going on in their life. And we're also learning the value of forgiveness. And we get to learning the value of forgiveness by not taking everything so personally and realizing these people didn't do that to us. That's just what they did. That's who they are. It doesn't say anything about us. Number 4 is experiencing this emotional autonomy, right? And emotional freedom in our connections with other people. What this means is that we do what we do because it's what we want to do, not because of the other person. Now that sounds like we might act selfishly, but we talked before about differentiation is acting for yourself without being selfish. It's not that we ignore the other person, we take them into consideration because a part of who we are is we have a desire to please and cooperate. But we don't emphasize our desire to please and cooperate at our own expense either. And when we don't know how to do that, we just share our dilemma. Hey, this seems important to me and I'm having a hard time thinking about what it means for you, but I want to talk about what makes it important. And maybe as I do that, I can have a better understanding of what this might mean for you in your life. So those are the ways we start to handle these things. But this autonomy and freedom is what emotional sobriety is all about. It's freedom from all of these ideas about how things are supposed to be, how we think we should be, etc., etc., and grounding ourselves more in what is. Number 5, we are learning to value the process of being and seeing the value in our life of that, which goes against the focus that our culture has on having. We live in a culture that is so defined by having. In fact, Dr. Eric Fromm says, in our culture, we live with the idea that I am more the more I have. And then, we as George Carlin says, we get bigger houses to get more stuff. And we get bigger garages to get more stuff. And we have all this stuff in our thing and thinking that somehow all this stuff is going to make us, feel more fulfilled and satisfied in life. And then we realize it's just stuff. That's not filling us at all. And that's the value, the process of being. Is that now we see that really being invested in developing who we are and dedicating ourselves to actualizing our potential becomes the best investment. Not getting another Sea-Doo, not getting 3 more cars or whatever you're into. The 6th reward of doing this work is that we now start to move towards being an individual that can be trustworthy. You cannot trust someone who does not have integrity. We are learning to honor our integrity. We're learning to claim our integrity, and we're becoming someone who can be trustworthy. And trustworthy doesn't mean that you do everything everybody wants you to do all the time. It means that you're authentic and you're going to tell someone the truth about what's going on and whether you want to do something or not. So don't misunderstand what it means to be trustworthy. We're also now embracing the value or the importance for us of being of value. That it's very important for each and every one of us to make a contribution, to be significant in some way to making this world a better place. And we're now seeing how we do that is by changing ourselves, by learning how to now make a contribution and add to justice, add to nobility. It's, just take all of the stuff in the St. Francis prayer and you can apply that. Another benefit that's occurring as we do this work is we're learning to soothe ourselves. And we're learning to soothe ourselves by staying grounded in who we are, about doing things that are uncomfortable because we know it's the right thing for us to do, even though we're going to be uncomfortable. And so we take those risks. We move into that area and we endure that discomfort because we know it's going to be meaningful to help us become what we can be. At the same time, we're learning to regulate our emotions. We're learning how to take care of ourselves instead of controlling everybody else and regulating everybody else to control our emotions. We flip it around and we worry more about how we're going to take care of what we're feeling, not how it's somebody else's responsibility. All the things I've talked about increase our self-esteem. That's the 9th reward. Nathaniel Branden has a wonderful book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. And you'll see as you start reading those 6 pillars, things like, living life with a greater degree of consciousness, taking responsibility for yourself, being appropriately assertive, living life with a purpose. All of these things are the things that we're doing, and we are increasing our self-esteem. We're feeling better and better about ourselves because now we are truly having a better reputation with ourselves. I love that definition of self-esteem he has. Self-esteem is the reputation we have with ourselves. Having integrity is one of his 6 pillars of self-esteem. And integrity here is not, don't think of it in the moral sense. Integrity means wholeness. We're learning to honor all the different parts of ourselves. You know, the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde. That's both of who I am. And now when I take responsibility, I'm taking responsibility for all of them, and I strive to have the best in me running the rest of me. So I try to put the right guy in charge of all these clowns and jokers. Number 11, we're learning what true intimacy is. It's where we make the other person as important as us, not more or not less. We have an eye to thou relationship where we don't look to the other person to take care of us. We look to the other person to have an experience with them, to get to know who they are, to experience what's going on with them, to share what our experience is. But we're not turning to them to make us whole. That's our job. And last but not least, we're learning how to be the self that we truly are. Now, all of these 12 things that I've just mentioned are all elements and components of our emotional sobriety. And you're going to see that what happens after we finish with step 9, as we start to talk about step 10, 11, and 12, 10 is integrating what we've just learned in steps 8 and 9 and making that a part of our daily life. And steps 11 and 12 is integrating all these other things into our daily life. The next 3 steps are about integration. And we cannot achieve emotional sobriety without that integration. So, I've said a lot in a short period of time. I will now, invite Roger and Tom to join me and to comment on whatever stands out for them. Good evening, Tom. Good evening, Roger.
Good evening, Alan. Take it away, Tom, if you're in the mood.
Sure. Well, yeah. Hold on. I'm clicking on something. Okay. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Well, my phone's my computer keeps saying unmute yourself, so I think I'll just start screaming. It's so Alan, is what the things that you just listed, is that in the book about the benefits of making amends?
Yeah, the hidden rewards of making amends.
I love that book. It's the first book you let me read ahead of time before it was published. I love that book very much, and if you guys haven't read that book, it's a wonderful book, and it certainly fits into what we're dealing with all of this. I mean, it's the payoff. So, just a couple of things, and these may be sort of random, but things that got my attention. First of all, you said, now I'm just nitpicking here, but the integrity, don't think about the morality of it. Or so I go like, no, I think wholeness is moral. I think it is, I mean, it's not moral in the sense of like we're talking about, some rules set by somebody on the outside of us, but just in terms of our own integrity is me being my best self. That's my morality. So I think it is. It's
love that.
And then one of the things I thought about, because coming into step 9, from the way that you introduced this for us and the way we've discussed this through this beginning with step 8, is one of the things that's jumped out at me, and I can't even remember exactly what it was you said that triggered this, but the idea of, I was reminded again that we're talking about, in step 8, we were talking about preparing to make amends with the awareness of not just the harm we've done in the most obvious ways, or those of us that are drunks and stuff like that, what we've obviously done, or lied or stolen or whatever we've done, but the harm that's been done because of our own self-hatred, because of our own lack of self-care, and lack of self-care is an understated way of way underway what we're talking about with self-hatred. And so the idea, I thought about, and I probably said this before, but it always brings back to mind the thing that one of my wife says, Dee Dee Beasley's an equine therapist. She talks about positive selfishness, and I, of course, it gets your attention. I like putting those two words together, but she has a definition for it. And the positive selfishness is self-focused that not only does not harm anyone, it actually is good for other people. And I love this idea that part of our healing through these steps, 8, 9, and then 10, is that we're becoming, this is action, like you said, we're becoming better people. And we're practicing this. We're trying this on, and we're practicing. One thing is you talked about. We're practicing empathy, and so this brings me to the very last piece that I was going to say is I also just jotted down. Empathy must always be accompanied by genuine curiosity. To me, my little nutshell about curiosity is the primary ingredient in respect. And curiosity is the opposite of assumption. But I like the idea of having empathy, having a sense, especially when we're dealing with going in, talking about harm that we believe we have done or may have done to others because of our own self-hatred. The humility factor here is we may be wrong about how other people have experienced us. And so as we have those conversations, as we make our amends with that stuff, it's not as clear cut as, oh, I stole that money out of your wallet. It's, I really it's a conversation. I really have discovered in my life that because I have treated myself so poorly that I, rather than getting my needs met directly or being honest with people, I was very manipulative. And I think that I did that a lot in our relationship, and as we talk about that, I need to be open to the fact that someone has something to say that basically indicates to me that I may have been wrong about how that person experienced me. And it's another opportunity to learn something about myself. So always coming back to curiosity.
I like that, Tom. I like that.
Thanks.
The curiosity piece, because I know a lot of the time, I'll make assumptions.
I knew you were going to say that, or I assumed you would. Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Anyway, I'll make assumptions about my impact that are way off base, right? They're total projections, both positive and negative, by the way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Both positive and negative. We use the word assumptions. They're actually conclusions I draw often rather than actual assumptions.
That's right.
But I do both. And so the answer to that is what? Is to check it out, right? To ask, and then hope that I can convey a sense of myself where I can actually handle receiving the truth, all right, which tends to be encouraging of people, which is a whole other subject, actually feeling safer to express the truth to me. And I'm not always in that place where I want to hear what the other person actually feels or thinks, but it's gotten better with time. I got to admit, this point is only slightly related to I think steps 8 and 9, but it's very much related to the first 2 points you mentioned, Alan, which is 2 of the 12 hidden rewards are learning how and the importance of staying in close contact with our own experience, right? And when I think of that, I mean everything, my dreams, my body awareness, my emotional awareness, my thoughts, my empathy toward others. That's all of that comes under the experience of life that I'm having in my mind. And then the second point is learning to be authentic. And I want to share a story. There's a therapist that nobody's ever heard of, hardly anybody, back in the 60s through 90s, especially, named Dick Olney, Olney. Never wrote any books, but he studied with some of the real luminaries. He studied with Fritz Perls to learn about Gestalt therapy. He studied with Alexander Lowen, the co-creator of bioenergetics, and to learn bioenergetics. And he created a form of working called self-acceptance training. And for those of you who've heard me talk before, what an important theme the power of self-acceptance is in my thinking and in the work that I do. And one of his students, Dick's been dead and gone for a number of years now, but one of his students named Shara McCoy, she tells a story in a short video online about self-acceptance training that I wanted to share, because I think it really embodies these first two hidden rewards. she talks about a lecture that she went to where a young woman was giving a talk, and she doesn't say what it was about or how many people were in the audience or whatever. But Sherry was aware that this young woman was having a really hard time giving this talk. She was very nervous, very unfocused, very scattered with her attention. And Sherry's going like, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well at all for the audience or for this young woman, right? And so she just sat and listened. And within a few minutes, the young woman started to do something unusual. She started to talk about how nervous she was rather than just trying to push through it and push ahead. And she talked about, I think, I'm embellishing it a little bit here for lack of exact memory, but I think she talked about, how scared she was and how nervous she was about public speaking and so on. And she actually started to cry in front of the audience. She just let herself cry. And Sherry was appreciative because, of what the young woman was doing and the courage she was doing. So after she did that, Sherry McCoy said a real transformation took place in this young woman. She became engaging. She became spontaneous. She became informative. She became, entertaining. Total transformation in the kind of speaker that this young woman was. And Sherry McCoy said, this young woman had probably never heard anything about self-acceptance training, but she could not possibly have given a better demonstration of what it meant to just allow her experience to unfold. And she may have had judgments about her or whatever, but she didn't get caught up with those judgments. She just got caught up with permission to let herself be who she was. And that's where it connects in with those first 2 points. She was connected to her experience as it unfolded. She was committed to authenticity. And very importantly, she shared what she was experiencing with the audience. And as Gestalt therapy and other therapies, client-centered therapy of Carl Rogers talk about, the reward of that for her was she stayed integrated because she stayed connected to herself the whole time. And then she was able to connect to other aspects of who she was to finish giving her speech. So I just wanted to share that story in terms of the importance of trying to honor who we are, including when we're making amends to another, to try to do it with authenticity as well as with empathy, both. And to realize, like Alan has emphasized often, that we're making the amends for both of us, but there's a lot of it that's for us, right? For the person who's making the amends. I like to point out something else about that story, and it's actually on reflection what stood out to me the most, because I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about here. The most striking thing about this story to me, because I work a lot within myself, within clients, with the idea of tracking my experiences as happening, trying to be authentic, trying to be genuine. But there's another piece that we don't talk about nearly enough. And the most striking piece of that story to me is that this young woman was in front of a group of people giving a speech, which was one of the most frightening things that she could ask herself to do. Mm-hmm. And in that context, being open about what she was experiencing helped her very much to become able to do that. But that part can be left out. Mm-hmm. Self-acceptance still involves us engaging those areas of life that are scary for us, right? Doing those things that really, really frighten us. And if that's what we're doing, then doing that in a self-accepting way, as this young woman modeled, is an amazingly powerful tool. It's also really powerful in our lives, even if we're not asking ourselves to do something difficult, like, make amends, right? Mm-hmm. Or share those amends, make a list and share them. But it's especially powerful if we are asking ourselves to show up toward things that are scary for us. So that's what I had for tonight, you guys. Thank you.
It's the opposite. Let me ask you this question. It's the opposite of dissociation, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it, because to the extent dissociation is denial of and numbing ourselves to
Well, the
our
way I think about
experience.
it, yeah, we
splitting.
dissociate because we're so uncomfortable to be in here. I go away.
Yes.
You know, I go down inside, or I actually leave my body, or whatever I do. In that case, what she did is she basically brought everybody else in and gave them a tour. You know,
I like that, Tom.
I think I love that story, Roger. That's so amazing.
I like it too.
No, Roger, you
you
brought up a very important part of this whole thing, and you described courage. That a lot of what's going on. I remember a conversation I had with my sponsor, Tom, one day, and he said to me, you know, Al, I've been given a lot of thought about what is necessary when we're beginning this journey of recovery. He says, I used to say it was trust, that you had to trust the people. He says, I've changed my mind. He says, I believe it's courage, that you have to have this courage to take some of these risks and to go into some areas, because it's a lot to ask of yourself to trust when you don't. But you might be able to find the courage to try things on and to do things like this woman did. It's to be able to be who she was truly at that moment and own it with that group of people in probably a terrifying situation for her. Public speaking is one of the greatest concerns, right? If you ask people, they said that's one of the top things in terms of people are afraid of.
Yeah.
And all I would add to that, Al, is, the same approach with regard to courage. If we're fearful and we can't muster the courage we need, then what self-acceptance means in that context is we meet ourselves there. But we bring it out. We start to talk about how scary it would be to do that. We just take ownership of our fears. That, for many of us, is the important first step.
Yeah.
Rather than laying a lot of shoulds on ourselves.
I love it. Owning my cowardice is a courageous act.
Exactly. Owning my cowardice is an act. It is an act of courage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Deborah from Los Angeles says, can we discuss what is operating when people gain inspiration by us sharing our failure?
Yeah. I have a lot of experience with that. Failure, not sharing the experience, but
well, it takes away the expectations, doesn't it? It's kind of says, hey, who I am right now is the important thing. And the way we talk about it in emotional sobriety and in the therapy that we do, Roger, is this self-support. See, she was able to support herself as she was, and to do that, we have to let go of these shoulds, or we have to neutralize them to a part where they're not controlling ourselves, so that we give that person a tour of the intrapsychic world that we're living in. All right.
And one more thing, and she shared what Carl Rogers, a famous therapist who was a real creator of humanistic psychotherapy, she shared his principle so profoundly, which is, who I am is good enough if I would only be it openly. And that just came to me a moment ago, but who I am is good enough if I would only be it openly.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.